Armenian government appoints Catholicoses. The power shift that occurred in Armenia, following Armenia's first president Levon Ter-Petrosyan's resignation in 1998, brought no significant improvement to the rule of law. Election fraud remained the authorities' key tool of longevity. Just as Ter-Petrosyan's administration had interfered with the Catholicoses election of 1995, making sure Karakin I ascended to the throne, so did Robert Kocharian's administration securing the election of Karakin II in 1999.
It was no secret that President Levon Ter-Petrosyan and his government were openly advocating the candidacy of His Holiness Karakin II Sargsyan, Catholicos of the Great House of Cilicia. It was also no secret that members and representatives of the government were actively campaigning for his election,
said Dr. Denis Papazian, professor emeritus at University of Michigan Dearborn, who was a delegate during the election of both Karakin I and Karakin II. Papazian approached the ranking government official to query why the government had taken a position in the election.
Most of the delegates,
the government official replied,
are good but simple people. Few of them know any candidate other than their own primate. These are important times for the Armenian people. We have a free and independent Armenia, but we have many problems. Why should not the President of the Republic and Armenia's chosen leaders give advice and counsel to those delegates who are not familiar with the candidates and their backgrounds? These issues need to be explained, so that the delegates can be enlightened when they vote. It is not a question of pro or anti-government, it is a question of what is best for the Church.
However, in the case of the 1995 election, Dr. Papazian and others who shared the same concern decided against whistleblowing simply because the government's choice, Karakin I, coincided with theirs. Thus, thanks to the government's efforts and the complicity of the delegates, Karakin II Catholicos of the Great House of Cilicia became Karakin II, Catholicos of all Armenians. His path was also smoothed over by his successor Archbishop Karakin Nerasesyan's withdrawal from the race. This act was praised in some media outlets as selfless and magnanimous. However, the future Catholicos was forced to withdraw from the race by the National Security Service, which had obtained material evidence in relation to his personal life that could seriously discredit him and end his clergy career. Other irregularities observed by Dr. Papazian during both 1995 and 1999 election were as follows.
First, the size of the delegations was based on estimates of the Armenian population of the various dioceses, not on baptized church and parish members. And secondly, as noted, the majority of the delegates seemed to have been appointed.
The government's involvement in the 1999 Catholicoses election process was met by a group of clergy with fierce opposition.
Recent observations show that the Armenian authorities at the highest level have come to a consensus in favor of one candidate, and are trying to install him on the throne.
However, their opposition failed to change the course of the events. Haranush Karatian, an ethnographer and a member of the Armenian Civil Initiative pre-parliament, also pointed out the fact of the delegates being appointed, rather than elected.
The delegates were elected with the consideration that they should agree. It was done on purpose. That is to say, it was a lie, that delegates were elected, they were appointed.
Karatian pointed out the unrealistic number of delegates from Russia.
There turned out to be 101 delegates from Russia, which implied the existence of over 2.5 million Armenians, which was a lie.
In the pre-election period, Haranush Karatian publicly criticized the flawed Catholicos election process, calling for immediate reforms.
I was often raising the issue that it was impossible to continue like this, to call something election, which has nothing in common with election,
she said. Another delegate, who has chosen to remain anonymous, confirmed the fact of the government's interference with the election process.
I knew, and everyone knew that the government was interfering.
Robert Kocharian's administration picked Archbishop Karakin Nerasesyan as government's choice of the Catholicos of all Armenians. However, despite being the government's favorite, Archbishop Karakin Nerasesyan was a target of bitter criticism in printed media.
They discredited him a good deal and requested postponement of the election by a week, by a month, because the atmosphere was such that it was impossible to hold an election there. But they didn't do it, because everything had already been organized,
said the anonymous delegate. This delegate was yet another source, confirming Louise Manoogian-Simone's allotment of $3 million to secure the election of Garaigin Q by bribing both lay and clergy delegates. Then Prime Minister Vezgan Sargsyan, who was in charge of the funds, was also reported to have resorted to violence against delegates in pursuit of his goal to bring Archbishop Garaigin Q to the throne. This topic will be covered in a later article. As for the election fraud, this delegate described it as follows.
Not that votes were falsified, everyone was under pressure. Everyone knows that. We were there. There were people from the KGB. From the KGB, because they were the ones who were exerting pressure. They would go to Echmiadzin every day.
On the election day, October 27, 1999, against the general rule of the Armenian Apostolic Church, according to which none other than lay and clergy delegates may be present in the voting area, there were numerous National Security Service agents and government representatives. Among them was R.M. Sargsyan, Vezgan Sargsyan's brother, who was seen using his phone, which was also a violation of the church rule of no communication with the outside world during voting. Judging by the sudden unusual activity of the government officials and agents during the voting, the anonymous delegate later concluded that R.M. Sargsyan and other government agents were notified of the parliament shooting, which claimed 8 parliamentarians and high-ranking officials' lives. The terrible news of the parliament shooting was announced only after Archbishop Garaigin Q.'s victory had been secured, and he had been announced the new Catholicos of all Armenians. Had they broken the news of Vezgan Sargsyan's death before the end of the voting, the Catholicos of all Armenians might have been a different person today. Many of the delegates had been intimidated, threatened or bribed personally by Vezgan Sargsyan to vote for Garaigin Q.